One of the most common questions I get is about vitamins. Should I take a multivitamin every day? Should anyone be taking routine multivitamins? Are vitamins really risk-free? And can't we just get all the nutrition we need from the food that we eat? That's what I'll be discussing in this lecture, all about vitamins and nutrition. In general, this lecture will cover a lot about what you should be eating. In an upcoming lecture, I'll talk more about what you should not be eating. Now, even in ancient history, people understood that there was some connection between nutrition, the food that we eat, and health. For example, the ancient Egyptians wrote about the fact that liver could be used to cure night blindness, even though they didn't understand at the time that it's because liver contains vitamin A and they were treating a vitamin A deficiency. But nutrition really entered the scientific era in 1747 when ship's surgeon James Lind conducted what is considered to be the first modern medical experiment in which he discovered that citrus fruit can cure scurvy. Now, scurvy is a deficiency of vitamin C, although vitamin C wasn't discovered until 1920. But Lind did an actual controlled experiment where he fed sailors who were suffering from early signs of scurvy citrus fruit and compared that to vinegar and also to a weak acid. He thought maybe it was acid that was deficient in scurvy. And it turns out that the sailors who received the citrus fruit did much better. They actually were cured of their symptoms of scurvy. So what is a vitamin, actually? Now, in the early 1900s, chemists were busy identifying various substances that would cure nutritional diseases. But it was Polish biochemist Kazimierz Funk who proposed the name vitamine, which was a combination of the words vital and amine. However, later it was learned that not all vitamins contain the chemical group called amine, and therefore that final E was dropped and we're left with the word vitamin. But specifically, vitamins are those nutritional substances that are essential to health in tiny amounts, but which an organism cannot manufacture in sufficient quantities for themselves. Therefore, you have to get vitamins from food by definition. And therefore, of course, which substances are vitamins depend on the species. Human beings, for example, need to get vitamin C from food, but most other mammals can make vitamin C for themselves. Vitamins are also defined by what they do. So, in fact, most vitamins are actually a group of compounds or chemicals that all have the same biological activity. Most vitamins are, in fact, cofactors for enzymes, which means they help biochemical reactions occur. Some vitamins, like vitamin D, also may have some hormone-like properties. We also classify vitamins based upon their solubility. Water-soluble vitamins, vitamins C and the B vitamins, are soluble in water and will be really quickly excreted in the urine. If you eat more than your body needs over a short period of time, you'll just get rid of the extra. However, vitamins A, D, E, and K are all fat-soluble vitamins. That means they are stored long-term in the fat of your body, and this also means that in order to get a deficiency of this vitamin, you have to have a deficiency in your nutrition, usually over a long period of time. Every vitamin is associated with a deficiency syndrome, and in fact, that's how they were first discovered. But also, many of them are also associated with known and sometimes very serious overdose syndromes as well. I'm going to quickly run through the different vitamins, their overdose and deficiency syndromes, and the common sources in food. Starting, of course, with vitamin A, which are the retinols, the RDA, which stands for the recommended daily allowance. Essentially what the RDA is, it's the minimum amount you need to get of a vitamin on a daily basis in order to prevent a deficiency syndrome. The RDA for vitamin A is 900 micrograms. Deficiency causes night blindness, as I mentioned previously, and an overdose causes what we call hypervitaminosis A, which is actually a very serious medical condition that can ultimately be fatal. Common sources of vitamin A include fruits and vegetables like mango, broccoli, carrots, spinach, and beef liver. Next, we have the B vitamins, and there are many B vitamins, starting with B1, or thiamine. The RDA there is 1.2 milligrams. A deficiency of thiamine can cause a very serious neurological disorder called Wernicke's-Korsakoff syndrome, where in the end stage, people actually completely lose their short-term memory. Overdoses will tend to cause drowsiness. Common sources of thiamine include spinach, green peas, tomatoes, watermelons, sunflower seeds, and other vegetables. Next, we have B2, or riboflavin. The RDA is 1.3 milligrams. The deficiency syndrome is ariboflavinosis, which causes changes to the skin and the oral mucosa, sores, and bleeding, for example. Common sources include spinach, broccoli, mushrooms, eggs, milk, liver, and some seafood items like oysters and clams. B3, or the niacin group, has an RDA of 16 milligrams. A deficiency causes a syndrome that has been recognized for centuries called pellagra, which we remember by the 3 Ds: dementia, diarrhea, and dermatitis. Overdose can cause liver damage. Common sources include vegetables like spinach, also potatoes, tomato juice, lean ground beef, chicken breast, and tuna. B5, or the pantothenic acid group, has an RDA of 5 milligrams. A deficiency causes paresthesia. That's a tingling sensation in the nerve, so it's a mild form of nerve damage. Overdoses can cause nausea and diarrhea. B5 is common in many foods, so it's very difficult, in fact, to get a deficiency of it. Next, we have B6, or pyridoxine. The RDA there is 1.3 milligrams. Deficiency of B6 causes anemia, or low blood counts, and also neuropathy, or nerve damage. And ironically, overdoses of B6 also can cause nerve damage, or neuropathy. Common sources include bananas, watermelons, tomato juice, broccoli, spinach, acorn, squash, potatoes, rice, and chicken breast. B7, or biotin, has an RDA of 30 micrograms. Deficiency causes dermatitis and dementia, and it is also a vitamin that is common in many foods. Next, we have B9, or folic acid. The RDA is 400 micrograms. Now, deficiencies of folic acid are most important in pregnant women, where they can cause a serious neurological developmental disorder called neural tube defects, such as spina bifida. And pregnant women should definitely take folic acid. Deficiencies in other populations or in anyone can also cause anemia. Sources include tomato juice, green beans, broccoli, spinach, asparagus, black-eyed peas, and lentils. B12, or cyanocobalamin, is 2.4 micrograms is the RDA. A deficiency causes a megaloblastic anemia, again, a low blood count of a specific type that can be diagnosed simply by doing a blood test. And common sources include meats, poultry, fish, shellfish, milk, and eggs. Next, we're off the B vitamins, we're on to vitamin C, or ascorbic acid. The RDA is 90 milligrams. Deficiencies cause scurvy, which I talked about previously. Sources are very common in fruits and vegetables, such as spinach, broccoli, red bell peppers, snow peas, tomato juice, but also the fruits like kiwi, mango, orange, and actually very high levels in strawberries. Vitamin D, or the cholecalciferols, have an RDA of 5 to 10 micrograms. A deficiency of vitamin D is called rickets, again, something that's been recognized for a long time, longer than we've known about vitamin D, and that causes abnormalities in bone development. The most common source of vitamin D is simple sunlight. Most people can get all the vitamin D they need just from everyday exposure to the sun. However, vitamin D is also fortified in milk and can also be found in egg yolks, liver, and fatty fish. Vitamin E, or the tocopherols, have an RDA of 15 milligrams per day, and deficiencies can cause neuropathy and ataxia, which is a poor coordination or poor ability to walk. Common sources include nuts, oils, sunflower seeds, whole grains, wheat germ, and spinach. And finally, we have vitamin K, or the menaquinones and phyloquinones. There, the RDA is 120 micrograms. A deficiency of vitamin K causes bleeding because vitamin K is very important in what we call the clotting cascade, the sequence of biochemical reactions that allows your blood to clot off and to stop bleeding from occurring. You can find vitamin K in the dark green leafy vegetables, including Brussels sprouts, spinach, broccoli, kale, and liver. Vitamins are only part of the nutritional content of food that we need to be concerned with. They are part of what we call the micronutrients. But let's turn now to the macronutrients. Macronutrients are those parts of food from which we get calories or energy, and also structural components, the stuff that we actually build our bodies out of. There are some essential fatty acids and amino acids, but these are not technically vitamins because we need them in more than tiny amounts. So they're still considered part of the macronutrients. So let's discuss the three main types of macronutrients that we get in our diet. These include carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are sugars and also starches like bread or pasta. There's also lipids. Lipids are essentially fats and oils. And there's protein. Protein comes from meats as well as nuts and legumes. Food also contains, in addition to vitamins and the macronutrients that I just discussed, many minerals, or these trace minerals as they are often called. These include calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, iron, zinc, copper, sodium, and potassium. These are also sometimes referred to as electrolytes. Now, the electrolytes are simply minerals that when they exist in our bodies in their ionic form. For example, sodium with a positive charge is the electrolyte sodium, but it is still considered a mineral that we get from our food. Incidentally, you can overdose on minerals as you can on many of the vitamins. The most common mineral overdose is iron. In fact, this is the most common childhood overdose of all, because children will often get iron from vitamins, which they may think of as candy, not necessarily medicine. And adult males do not need to supplement iron at all. In fact, we recycle almost all of our iron, so therefore the only people who really need to supplement are those who are either anemic or women who are menstruating because they need to replace the iron they lose each month. So let's talk a bit about optimal nutrition. How do we get all the things that I spoke about in our food? There is general agreement in the scientific community that the best way to get good nutrition is through a well-balanced, varied diet. Variety is the key, and you should definitely avoid highly restrictive or narrow diets that are dependent on just a few different kinds of food. The USDA food pyramid goes over the rough proportions of different kinds of foods that would be contained in a healthful diet. Here's a basic overview. A healthful diet should contain and should emphasize these things: about 2 cups of fruit and 2.5 cups of vegetables per day. Now, you don't have to measure these out precisely. This is really just a rule of thumb, a guideline to help you estimate that you're getting enough of the different kinds of foods you should be eating. When you do eat vegetables, you should try to pick from the different subgroups of vegetables. These include dark green vegetables, orange vegetables, legumes, starchy vegetables, and other vegetables. In addition, you should get 3 or more ounce equivalents of whole grain products per day, with the rest of your carbohydrates coming from either enriched or whole grain products. And 3 cups per day of fat-free or low-fat milk or equivalent milk products. Of course, to round out your diet, you're also going to be getting protein from lean meats as well as eggs, nuts, and legumes. Now, do we need to take vitamins every day? And that question, of course, is related to the deeper question of, do we get enough of our vitamins that we need from the food that we eat? There are only minor differences in nutritional quality of food depending on the production methods. Meanwhile, in modern times, and for the first time really in human history, due to globalization, for example, we have access to a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables year-round. So it's important to take advantage of that. Year-round, you can get both tomatoes and strawberries and bananas, a variety of fruits and vegetables that will have a much greater impact on your overall nutrition than the mild differences between different food production methods. Now, one topic that comes up frequently among those who are concerned about the nutritional quality of our food is soil depletion. There are reports that perhaps due to modern agriculture, we are depleting our soil of the minerals that are necessary, and therefore we're losing those trace minerals from our diet. Most people who make this point or who are concerned about this will refer to a 1936 congressional statement that turns out, actually, when you look at it closely, was an article that was written in Cosmopolitan magazine, a literary magazine. This was inserted into the congressional record by Senator Duncan Fletcher from Florida. But that becomes a primary reference for those who argue that our soil is depleted. They say, hey, if it was that depleted in 1936, imagine how bad it must be today. Now, reports that our soils are depleted of minerals are often misinterpreted. It turns out that soil is actually frequently tested for its mineral content, and minerals are added in the farming process, in the fertilization process of the soil. The plants need the minerals to grow as well, too. So agricultural companies want to replete those minerals so that their yields will be maximal, and that mineral content is in the food. Which different types of food are most nutritious, depending on how it's prepared and packaged? It is true that cooking decreases the nutrient content of food. Not too much, but it is measurable. It does decrease the nutritious content. So it is important to eat fresh fruits and vegetables to get maximal nutrition, or to just lightly steam them. You should avoid thoroughly boiling food because that does leach out much of the vitamins and minerals. What about frozen versus fresh and canned? Well, frozen food is definitely better than canned in terms of its nutritional content. In fact, frozen vegetables may be slightly better than fresh if the frozen vegetables are picked at the peak of ripeness and then frozen at that time, versus vegetables which are allowed to ripen in transport or in the stores, for example. What about organic food? Now, I'm going to be talking in a lot more detail about organic farming and food in a future lecture. But suffice to say for now that reviews of published evidence show that there are only negligible differences in the nutritional quality between organic and non-organically grown food. So this brings us to our first big vitamin myth, that routine vitamin supplementation, or taking a daily vitamin, is important for everyone's health and well-being. In fact, there is no evidence for any health benefit of routine supplementation. Now, this is admittedly a very difficult question to answer. If you want to know if there are long-term health advantages to vitamins over decades, those studies are very difficult to do. However, we have done observational studies. The biggest is a Swedish study that looked at hundreds of thousands of people that had enrolled in various different clinical trials. And they found no correlation between those who routinely supplemented with vitamins and health outcomes. In fact, there was a slightly increased risk of death among those who supplemented. Now, no one interprets this study as establishing a cause and effect. It could possibly be, and in fact it probably is true, that people who are taking vitamins are doing so because maybe they're not as healthy to begin with, and that's why their outcomes weren't as good. But the bottom line is, if we look at all the research that we have, experimental or observational, there is no evidence to back the claim that routine supplementation is important for health. For most people, eating a balanced diet is enough. Further, studies which show advantages, health advantages or good outcomes based upon nutrition, really are only able to link those advantages to eating healthy foods, not to taking supplements. Therefore, we come back to the conclusion, based upon the evidence, that the best thing to do is to have a healthy diet full of fruits and vegetables and variety. But there are many special situations to consider. When I refer to routine supplementation, I'm talking about in a healthy person with no medical conditions. But what about subpopulations? Let's, for example, first go to children. Children certainly do have increased nutritional needs because they're growing. So should we routinely give children vitamin supplements? Well, it's probably still the best recommendation based upon the evidence that what's most helpful for growing kids is that they have a healthy diet. And in fact, you should get children in the habit of eating lots of fruits and vegetables and a generally varied and healthy diet, even from a young age. However, I have kids. I know how difficult it is to get them to eat their vegetables, how difficult it is to get them to eat a variety of things. So if your children do have a restricted diet, despite your best efforts, it is reasonable to consider supplementation as nutritional insurance. Pregnancy is another situation in which there are increased nutritional demands. Pregnant women have incredibly high nutritional demands, and it is routinely recommended for pregnancy, in fact, for women who are planning on possibly becoming pregnant, to take a prenatal vitamin, because you need to boost your nutritional reserves before you know that you're pregnant. Specifically, folic acid has been shown to be important, as I mentioned earlier, and supplementing with folic acid reduces neural tube defects like spina bifida. What about some specific vitamins? For example, vitamin D. Now, vitamin D insufficiency and deficiency is being increasingly recognized in even Western and developed countries. As many as 2/3 of the population in recent studies has been shown to be vitamin D insufficient, not fully deficient, not the kind of deficiency that would cause rickets, but maybe not getting as much vitamin D as they should. Now, most of our vitamin D does come from just exposure to sunlight. The vitamin D gets manufactured in reaction to exposure to the sun. And for the average person, 15 minutes of sunlight exposure per day is sufficient to meet your vitamin D needs. However, that's an average person. This will obviously vary based upon your latitude, where you are in the world. People in Florida, for example, don't need as much sun exposure as those living in Alaska. It also depends on your pigmentation, how dark-skinned you are. The darker your skin, the more sunlight you need, and also the time of year. People do tend to become relatively insufficient in vitamin D during the winter months and have more vitamin D during the summer months. Therefore, for more people than we had previously thought, it may be necessary to supplement vitamin D if you're not getting enough from sunlight and from fortified foods. Calcium is another special situation. Adult women, especially those approaching menopause, may need to supplement calcium and vitamin D in order to optimize bone density and prevent osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is a relative decrease in the calcium content of bones. Once women go through menopause, they steadily lose bone content, so it's important to build up as much bone density as possible prior to menopause. And the ways to do that are with supplementing calcium, perhaps vitamin D, and of course with weight-bearing exercise. That's important as well. Vitamin B12 is another one that deserves special consideration. As we age, we actually have a decreased capacity to absorb vitamin B12 just from our food. B12 can't be passively absorbed like most nutrients in food. It needs to be actively carried into our blood system from the food. And that system can decrease as we age. So a lot of people do become relatively or absolutely vitamin B12 deficient as we get older. That's the kind of thing that a primary care doctor will check routinely just to make sure your vitamin B12 levels are sufficient. If they are on the low side, then oral supplementation for most people is enough in order to replenish your B12 supplies. However, if the ability to absorb the B12 has decreased too much, then you may actually need vitamin B12 injections, a monthly B12 shot, in order to keep your levels up in the normal range. Vegetarians also have special nutritional needs because they have chosen to narrow the range of foods that they will eat. Now, you can get everything you need from a very vegetarian or even vegan diet, but you have to know what you're doing and you have to be very careful. Vitamin B12 specifically can be a problem because a lot of the B12 that we get comes from animal sources. So if you are choosing to have a vegetarian or vegan diet, be careful that you're eating foods that contain a lot of B12, or you may want to have your B12 levels checked and supplement if necessary. There are also a number of medical conditions in which our nutritional needs may be greater than at baseline, and where supplementation may be beneficial. There are also specific conditions or diseases in which there isn't a deficiency, but taking extra vitamins may actually improve symptoms or outcome. For example, there is reasonable evidence to support that vitamin B2 reduces the frequency of migraine attacks. And therefore, in people with mild to moderate migraine headaches, supplementing B2 may improve the number of headaches that you have. Also, there's evidence to support vitamin B6 for nerve healing. So for those who have, say, carpal tunnel syndrome, a very common compression of the nerve, of the median nerve in the wrist, again, long-term healing and outcomes will be better if you take moderate supplements of vitamin B6. But again, I have to caution you that even slightly overdosing on B6 can actually cause nerve damage, so be sure you're taking the proper dose. And it's been long recognized that vitamin C is important for wound healing. As I mentioned previously, vitamin C is important for making structural proteins, the kind of things that hold our cells together and our tissue together. And therefore, if you've just had surgery or if you're healing from an injury, taking extra vitamin C for a period of time will help you heal faster. I do want to emphasize, however, that while vitamins are, by definition, essential to nutrition to prevent deficiencies and improve many medical outcomes, that we need to avoid the myth that if some vitamins are good, then more must be better. And this has led to some to recommend very high doses, sometimes what we call mega doses of vitamins. However, there is no theoretical reason, nor is there any evidence to support either the safety or the health effectiveness of megadosing, and it is not recommended. Many water-soluble vitamins, such as vitamin C, you will simply excrete in your urine if you try to megadose. So it is not as dangerous as the fat-soluble vitamins, but it is a waste of time and money. High doses of vitamin E, for example, which is a fat-soluble vitamin, has been shown to correlate with an increased risk of heart disease. So even aside from the notion of toxicity, of overdosing toxicity, regularly supplementing with high doses of certain vitamins actually correlates with an increased risk of certain diseases. What about superfoods? Are there some foods that are so nutritious that we can get really great nutrition just from eating a small amount of them? Well, the bottom line is there is no food in a pill, and there is no food that you can take in tiny amounts that will have a significant impact on your overall nutrition. Examples of some kinds of foods that are marketed as so-called superfoods include spirulina, which is essentially pond algae, wheatgrass juice, which I've actually tried and I don't recommend it. It's not very tasty. But the notion is that it contains special nutrients like chlorophyll and high doses of vitamins that can act as a superfood, when in reality it has no more vitamins or nutritional content than just common fruits and vegetables that are much more tasty. And there's also, of course, the latest fad tropical super juice, like acai juice, for example, which is claimed to have all kinds of vitamins and nutrients in it. But again, when you actually look at the data, it's just another kind of fruit juice. What about natural vitamins? If you do supplement for whatever reason, should you look for natural vitamins instead of synthetic vitamins? On the notion that they will be more effective or that they will have more of a healthful effect. Well, it turns out that ascorbic acid is ascorbic acid, for example, that if you have synthetic vitamin C versus vitamin C that is derived from, say, a plant source, the chemical structure is identical, and therefore the chemical properties are identical as well. The source doesn't matter to the chemical properties of that molecule. The best advice, if we try to boil everything that I discussed in this lecture down, is to keep it simple, not to get overwhelmed with the complexity of all the different types of nutritional advice that people are willing to give. A few simple rules are enough. Eat a variety of foods, eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, and for most people, in most situations, you will be fine. You will have perfect health in terms of your nutrition. As we will see in the next lecture, the problem for most Westerners is not that we get too little of any kind of food. In many instances, it's that we get too much.